Welcome to our US webinar number 3. And today we have excellent speaker Madeleine and Karina, who's going to talk a little bit about, I don't know if we call it soft power or how you, but understanding the core pillars of business in the US anyway, from a little bit of a different angle, I would say. And I will hand over to Madeleine and Karin.
Hello,
Welcome.
everyone. Thank you. Good morning or afternoon, I should say, depending on where you're located. Karna and I are super excited to be here to share our learnings and experiences working in the US. And just like Ulf said, we're going to focus a little bit more on ways of working, really giving you the secrets that we've seen and learned. Karna and I have both worked in the US for over 30 years. We're dating ourselves a little bit, but that's okay. We've worked at large corporations, small corporations. We've started companies. We worked at consultancies and agencies. And during that time, we've really taken the time to observe ways of working, not just like from a business management perspective, because of course we're leaders in business, but really leaning in and understanding how the Americans work, because that's what's made us successful. And so like Ulf said, we're going to lean in a little bit more on that ways of working, because as folks coming from Nordic countries, we think we know the US. We've seen it from the media. We know the brands, so we think we know the culture. But as you start working, you realize pretty quickly that it's not what you see. It's definitely a little bit different. So we'll walk through some of that today. We want this to be informal, by the way. Please keep your cameras on if you can. Ask questions. Ulf is going to keep an eye on our chat. And if we can't answer, because we have a lot to share, the content, if we don't have time to answer all the questions, we'll definitely reach out to you afterwards. So use this time to really dig in and ask us anything you can think of, since we've been here for a while. We know this stuff. So Ulf, if you can, the next slide, please. So like I said, we're going to talk about the US corporate culture, successful leadership style, which is so important, the power of networking, finding and retaining talents, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for more questions. So let's dig in. Let's see if we can, Ulf, the next. We'll start with the US corporate culture. So Karna and we always say when we go through these presentations that think of every state in the US as a different country. Not only do they have their own laws and regulations, they also work very different. And that's why we like to add that to these presentations, because when you look at the different areas, you have Northeast. This is the area maybe we know the best coming to US. It's New York, it's the coast, right? It's fast-paced, it's competitive, direct communication, high work ethic. Then you have Southeast, which is more relationship-driven, polite and respectful, a little bit slower pace, I should say. Mid-Atlantic, it's more professional and diverse, moderate work-life balance, and very networking oriented. And then lastly, it's the West, which we know is more relaxed. So it's more relationship driven, polite and respectful, slower paced, growing and dynamic. So when you look at this, the first glance, you're like, well, West looks really good. And it's more slower, it's more polite. But of course, Karna and I love the Northeast. This is where we are located. And the pace is also something you can use to your advantage. It is faster, which means you can business move faster, decisions move faster, like networking is faster. So it just gives you more opportunities too. So when you come to this, if you decide to come to the Northeast and to the East Coast, it's something, if you embrace it, it will give you so many opportunities to really get into the business that way. Does this make sense? Any questions? It's interesting because this is one of the first decisions as when you come here. Where am I going to go? So not just looking at the culture, but also looking at the businesses that are there. Again, of course, we love Boston, Karna and I, and we say if you are in life science or med tech, it's a great area to come to. That's where you should go. If you are in trade or politics, whatever it is, mid-Atlantic, you have to look at the different areas and take all of these aspects into consideration. But the corporate culture is usually something maybe you don't have on your list when you make these decisions. So it's interesting to look at this and know the difference.
Mother, can I add something here?
Of course. Yeah.
So it's not only the corporate culture that you're looking at, you're also looking at the business culture, like who are your customers? How do they make decisions? Who are your employees? How much are you going to pay them? What are their expectations? What is their educational background? All of this, a lot of times I know when we come from, other countries outside of the US, we look at this as one big country. It truly isn't. And it's one of those fundamental things that you do need to know about doing business in the US. Every state has its own laws. Every region has its own thing, whatever it may be. And it's super important to do your research on beforehand, which is something that we also help with.
I have a question about Northeast. Can you tell me more about the direct communication?
Yes. So how do I explain this? This is not like it's just business. Like every time I tell people, like, you can't take anything personal. And when Americans communicate at work, it can come off as short. As we coming from Nordic countries, sometimes it can hurt our feelings because nobody's going to take time to sugarcoat anything. It's just like, hey, I need this done and I need it by end of day, end of story. And you're like, whoa. But it's just how we communicate here. It's very direct and they expect it to be direct. So you have to adapt your style as well too. So something we've had to work on coming here early in our careers is that in the US, you don't ask permission, you ask forgiveness. So you just keep on going, and you're like just straight to the point. But it can come off as rude, but they're not rude. There's just like, it's all about business. So very direct, they'll say it as it is. So yeah, I often even have Americans coming to me, the younger ones, the younger generations being like, I can't believe this person said this to me. And I'm like, well, I can. And this is what he's saying, or this is what she's saying. Yeah, you have to sort of translate it sometimes. So it's something to be prepared for. Yeah, something to be prepared for. It's like, even if you are reaching out to a client, the client will be direct and say, at this moment, I don't have time to discuss this, blah. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess we're not working together. And when it's like, no, we are. We're just going to wait until next week.
Don't take it personally.
Don't take it personally. You can't take anything personally. So it's very different. And they expect the same. If you are like, hey, I was thinking about maybe doing this and it would be great. Maybe if we can discuss this, they're going to be like, no, what? So this is something, Ulf, if we can go to the next slide, actually, because it's leading into what we're going to talk about is that they are expecting you to show up as they are, their style. Otherwise, they're going to look at you and say, oh, that's not leadership. So if you look at the difference between the United States and the Nordic countries, it is all about, and we're going to go more into leadership conversations in the following slides too. But when you look at this high level, the speed of communication and the direct style are probably the two biggest differences in the cultures that you're going to have to get used to. And it's not just about understanding the communication they're using here. It's also almost the biggest piece saying, how am I going to show up? How do I need to change my style to be successful here? Because it's not just to your clients how you need to show up, it's also to your teams, because your brand as a leader is what's going to attract, new talent when you're hiring people. It's going to attract clients. It all ties together, which is why Karna and I today are talking about the culture, the leadership style, retention, and finding talent and getting your company out there, because it's all tied into your style, not just as a company, but also as a leader. So if we compare these two, Nordic countries, if you look at leadership style, more flat structure. Here it's all about the structure. And people will talk differently to the CEO, to folks. They'll treat people different where you are on and which level, which is, to us, it's wrong, right? That's not what we're used to, but that's how it is. It's very structured. Work-life balance, there isn't any in the US. It's gotten better, much better. Often at work, people say, hey, I'm going to be out for an hour this afternoon. I'm driving my child to tennis, or hey, I'm not working tomorrow. It's getting better, but you are still, you still need to get your work done, and that doesn't matter if that's going to take you 80 hours. So it's on you how to set boundaries and setting expectations. And Karna has a good story too about like the speed of communication is what's so critical, because if a client emails you and you might be on vacation, you might be on the beach somewhere, they don't care where you are and what you do. If my manager communicates, he doesn't care what I'm doing at that moment. You have to respond, or they're going to think that you're not interested. Yep.
I was as an example, I was working with a Swedish company that was getting ready to move over here, and I had found a fantastic opportunity for them to get involved with one of the local, very, very well-known universities here in Boston. So I sent the introductory between, the university and the college and the company. And I said, I don't want to be the middleman. I think it's much better that you two communicate directly. And if I remember correctly, this was in the month of February. So I heard nothing. And my contact over the dean, where we're at the university, didn't hear anything either, and started asking me, like, what's going on? Are they not interested? And this was, maybe a day after I had sent the introductions. There was nothing, crickets. So I reached out to the company. I heard nothing. I called. I didn't hear anything. And I'm like, oh my God. So now my reputation is on the line here as well, right? Because I've made the introduction. And about 3 or 4 days later, I get a response. And the response was, oh, sorry, I was on sportlov. So we were, out skiing, and I wasn't checking email. And that was from one of the C-suite level people in the company. That is just unheard of in the US. You cannot do business like that here. So if you get a lead, if there's something that is a good thing, positive thing for you in the company, you need to react and react quickly, because otherwise it's going to go away. They're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah. Absolutely. And like I said earlier too, it's about knowing the other cultures. So another fun story is I was working at this large agency. Ericsson came in, we were going to pitch them, and they found out that I was from Sweden. So they were like, hey, Madeline, can you just come in and just be another Swede? It would be so great. Like, just be there and be in the presentation. And I was like, absolutely. So the American team goes through their pitch. It's huge presentation. And afterwards, the team came to me and said, oh my God, that was a disaster. Like, I don't think we won that. Like, they didn't seem interested. They showed no interest. There was no energy. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, they looked at you, they nodded, they smiled. They weren't laughing, but they gave a little smirk. They smiled. They were looking at you the whole time. I was like, they were very interested. But if you don't know how to read the different cultures, the US team would have lost out on that too. They didn't even think it was worth checking in with them afterwards. And we always say you only get one chance. So knowing when you come in, if you're doing a pitch, if you're meeting with the clients, you have to look at it from both angles and from both sides to really understand, and then saying, okay, how do I show up for this presentation to really show these leaders and other companies and customers in the US that I am interested. So you're going to have to dial it up. You're going to have to be energetic. You have to be engaged, come prepared with questions, whatever it is. And it doesn't feel comfortable in the beginning, but that's what they're expecting. They want that high energy. So it is so important to understand the culture that you're going to be part of coming here.
Well, you can even see it in me right now. I'm not speaking. This is Madhu's presentation to start with, right? So she's speaking. I'm, however, engaging. I'm looking, I'm nodding, I'm smiling, I'm laughing, even though my microphone is off. This is now natural to me, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people, when they sit in presentations like this, they're going to sit just like that. And it shows nothing, right? So you need to show your enthusiasm. You need to be that overly extrovert person, which is very challenging for Swedes. I have just one more example that I find so funny. I had pretty much just moved to the US, and this is over 30 years ago. I was in New Jersey. I was walking on the boardwalk on Jersey Shore, and I was with a friend, and this friend was from up here in this region. And when we were walking down the boardwalk, he was saying hi to like everyone that we met. Hey, how are you? Great morning, isn't it? Blah, blah, blah. And finally, I had to ask him, I said, how do you know all these people? And he looked at me as though I was an alien. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, you're saying hi to everyone. You're greeting everyone. How do you know these people? And obviously, he didn't. But that's the American way.
Yeah. Yep. Karna and I knew we were Americanized when, like, I cannot be in an elevator now without talking to people. And when I go home, I usually talk to people and people think we're crazy, right? They're like, why is she talking to me? But it's just nice. I'm like, have a great day. Good morning. Oh, I love your shoes. Like, that took a while for us to get used to that. But we are those people now. We've been here that long. But it's so important.
Walking into ICA Maxi and greeting people like, hey, how you doing? Wow, look at that. That's on sale. That's good stuff. People are going to be like, oh, why are you talking to me?
Yeah.
I've experienced that several times in Sweden.
Here they love it. Yeah. Yeah. Looking at a couple more core values, we in the Nordic countries, again, fairness, equality. Here, there's no fairness. There's none. Like, you need to play the game. If you are in a company, people know how to get in front of leadership so they can get promoted faster. Doesn't mean they have the best experience or more experience than others. It's all about, there's nothing that's fair. You have to be outgoing. You have to promote yourself all the time. And people are also used to, when doing that they get rewarded. So if you now start your company here and you are managing it like you were in one of the Nordic countries, it's going to be tough for you to retain that talent because they're used to that. They're looking for career growth. They're looking to be driven and forward and assertive. So something to be mindful of as well. I think we can go. Any questions? Any thoughts?
No, I agree also with a lot with what you're saying. Although in Skåne, everyone says hello to one another.
That's good.
When you're walking down the street, it's very friendly.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
yeah, that's great.
I don't think you get anything for free. So I think if somebody wants, if you want to get ahead, it's not just about being nice all the time. It's about performing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a business.
If you say you can do it, then do it, right?
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So.
Yeah.
I have a question. So it's extremely important to understand the business culture of the other party, of course. Whether it's Asian people you're talking with or American people, it's a huge difference.
Yeah.
And everyone knows this. Everyone knows that there are big differences. Would you say that American, if they are being presented to the fact that these people comes from the Nordic countries, respect the difference and adjust to that? Or would you say that they don't give a heck? They just run and expect to run it their way?
I think and Karna, you can jump into. I think that they will be respectful and say, "Oh, that's a good point. Okay, we'll think about it." But at the end of the day, they're going to do it their way. So they might say, like, of course, because they're nice people here. That's why Karna and I are here. We love working with everybody here. But at the end of the day, I don't think they're going to go out of their way to change their approach. They're going to assume that you are changing your approach. But you saying it, they'll be like, "Oh, that's a good point. That's a good reminder. Okay, let me think about it." But I haven't seen anybody that they really take that into consideration. Like I still get in reviews and things like that. Like in the past, it was like, "You need to do this, you do that," and I was like, "Well, that's the culture." But that was like, get used to it. Figure it out, Madeline. It wasn't like, "Oh, let's take that into consideration." Yeah.
The expression goes, "When in Rome, be like Romans."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's very different. If you have a company and you are interested in moving in to the US, you need to be like the Romans. You can still bring your culture, your traditions, your Nordicness, all of that, because that will be appreciated and you can use it as part of your brand, right? So this is part of selling your company as a Nordic, Scandinavian, whatever, European company.
Your brand. Mm-hmm.
However, when you're doing business, you need to be on their terms because you are selling to them. They're not selling to you. If they come to, another country, they're going to have to do the same. But you cannot approach doing business in the US as from the country that you're from. You have to adapt.
Yeah.
I fully agree on that. Definitely. It's what I'm asking, I think, is whether they would have the understanding, because in the very end, you want to close the deal. And if they are discussing with me, I guess they want to do that as well. And we want it to be as good as possible, which means that we need to understand each other and each other's needs and driving factors.
Yeah,
and to do that, we need to know who we have on the other side.
Yeah, no, that is a good point. And I don't think it would hurt if you're doing a pitch or you're starting to meet with clients to say, "Hey, just a reminder, this is where we're coming from. This is our style. We want you to understand us so that you know when we're communicating. We'll do our best to adapt to the culture here, but just let's be clear, like this is our communication style." I think it would be good as a clarifying factor and just have it part of, let's say, this is who we are. I think that would be good, but maybe not, you might not be able to count on that they are going to take that into consideration and be that understanding, because like Karna said, when in Rome. I think it's also when you start hiring people here that they might, you can use that Nordic culture and say, "We are more fair, we're all this," to your team, but they're also going to expect for them to have career growth. They're going to want to compete to get to the next level. It's tough to get that culture away. So you can make it part of your presentation when you meet with them so they understand it. You can present it to your team members, but know that there's definitely going to be that difference that you have to be mindful of and you have to lean into.
I also think that there's a geographical component here. I think that there are silos in the US where they're more used to cultural differences, where they're more accepting of it. So, obviously New York, Boston, San Francisco, Atlanta, like the bigger cities where you see it and where you have a higher influx of people from other areas and other cultures. And there are parts of the US that are not going to understand it at all. I went to a conference in Texas, in Odessa, Texas, many years ago, because I was selling to the oil industry and the energy industry. And there was absolutely no understanding of different cultures whatsoever, not even different genders in that specific area. And I was told, because I was actually selling translation services at the time, and I was told by so many people, "Don't you all speak American?" So, American wasn't, that was the translation basically. So everyone should speak English, everyone. So I think you're going to have to adapt. I don't think seriously that there is a one size fit all answer here. You're going to have to look at the region. You're going to have to look at your, your target market. You're going to have to look at the kinds of things that you're selling to adapt and understand.
Yeah.
Sorry that I can't be any more specific, but I honestly think that that's the case.
Yeah, that's what we've seen in our experience. Yeah. Yeah, that's why Boston is a great place. It's very diverse. It's a bit easier to partner with Americans here. Ulf, I know I'm keeping an eye on the clock too, so we'll make sure. So successful leadership styles. Next one. We've looked a little bit at this. The point we want to make here is that having a strong leadership brand is critical in the US. So not just a brand for your company, but you have to now, like we said before, look at the leadership style in the US and say, how am I going to adapt here? And what will my style be? Because that's going to be important to your business, to your customers, and to your team. And really coming in, be prepared and say, okay, I'm going to be more direct and assertive here. I'm going to have a strong personal branding. So when people work with me, they know what I stand for. So like looking back and reflecting at the job interviews and everything, a lot of times we've taken jobs because the CEO was a true leader, inspiring. The vision for the company was great. Maybe my direct manager wasn't that great, but we look at the leaders because we said, okay, do I believe in this leader? Do I want to follow this leader? And the way that they're leading the company, is that inspiring to me? And do I feel good? So it all ties together. So taking the time to reflect again when you come here to say, how do I want to show up? And what kind of leader am I going to be? That's why it's good to understand the styles here and then saying, this is how I'm going to show up. You can do the next one. And let me know if I'm going too fast here. I just want to make sure we have so much content that we can talk about it. So, what are some of the challenges you might run into? You have to be more decisive and fast-paced, adapt your communication style, embrace competition and performance-based culture. When you look at your company, you're going to have to make sure, again, you have all the levels so that you allow people to grow in their career. It's all about performance in the US, so you need to build into your system of ongoing feedback to your team members, support and mentorship. They're expecting that because everybody here wants to grow as a professional. They want to have a successful career. They're very driven. So you also need to adapt your business to have that model. And then increase visibility and personal branding. Like we said, you need to define your brand as a leader, because that is what's going to sell business just as much as your company brand. It's for how you show up. And Karna's going to talk a little bit more about networking, and that's where that comes into play. It's so important. And then something else to get used to then is also our insight is be prepared for longer working hours and higher pressure. And maybe that is a benefit you can say when you start that, hey, we don't have that culture in the Nordics. So if you start working here, if you work with us, you're going to have a little bit more of a balance. That could be a selling point. But the important thing here is to be aware of it and deciding on how are you going to adapt and how are you going to manage this aspect. Next one, please. Okay, so Karna, you want to jump in?
Yep. All right. Let's talk a little bit about networking. Networking is super important. You all know that. You're all doing it, I'm sure, today already. There is, however, a bit of a difference. So in the US, there is a huge emphasis on self-promotion, ambition, personal initiative. I'm actually still struggling with this today, right? Because you are in the US, it's okay to stand up and say, I'm really good at this. I know what I'm talking about. I know the answers. I can do this, right? In Sweden, or in Sweden, Nordic countries, but Sweden specifically, at least I am. I'm not going to speak for you, but I know both Madde and I have this. We're basically cursed by jantelagen. We grew up with it. We were like in schools, at home, all of that. You're really not more special than anyone else. In the US, you are more special than anyone else. And it's important to know and notice. However, there's a really, really, really fine line between being that extrovert and talking about yourself and being confident to being arrogant and self-absorbed. And those are not values that are cherished over here. So don't think that, you know, you should come across being boastful. There's a very fine balance, right? So there's a cultural emphasis on individualisms. In schools, they teach this from kindergarten. The kids are doing presentations in first grade, standing up, they're performing, they're doing all of these things, and they get videotaped. So they get to see themselves. Like, I've been going through this with my son actually just recently, because he's doing a big presentation, and he told me that, you know, the teacher is grading them not only for the content of the presentation or how they do the presentation, but their posture, how many pauses they take, are they engaging with the audience? All of these things are being taught here in school. They have a huge advantage compared to many of us.
Yep, Karna, just to add,
yes, sorry.
Just to add to that real quick, like we might have done some of the presentations in Sweden too, but here it's really an art, to Karna's point. Like, it's an art because it's like you're told to be assertive, but you can't be aggressive. You need to be heard, but you can't show up with an ego. So that's what the kid, like, that's what they're leaning into more of, that art of like, how do you position yourself as a leader at a young age, even the right way? It's an art. So it takes it to the next level.
I've coached a lot of people, even in the US, in regards to public speaking. You know, how do you do it? How do you come across? How do you get people to engage with you? What are the things that you're focusing on? So when you're networking, whether it's in a small format or a large format, this is really important, and practice truly makes perfect. The communication style in the US, a little bit dependent on where you are, but when it comes to professional networking, is pretty informal, right? But it's pretty informal to a certain point. So you don't sort of like, you know, sit down and put your feet up on a table. It's not that informal, but you can still, you know, shake hands and rub shoulders and do all of those things. As I said, promote yourself. It is super important that you do. Your personal brand, your professional brand, and your company's brand, because whenever you're out there networking, you are representing not only you, personally and professionally, but you're also representing your company. You are the brand of your company, unless you're out looking for a job, because if you're looking for a job, then you are, of course, branding as yourself. So how do you do this? How do you network in the US? Well, there are a lot of different ways of doing it, and a lot of these are exactly the same as, you know, what they are in other countries. You make sure that you expand your LinkedIn network. LinkedIn is super important over here. We use it for a lot of things. You can join LinkedIn groups, be active, but don't sell, but be active, join the discussion, create content that is interesting and share it. Go to local events, right? All networking kind of starts locally. So if they know you locally, then you can take the next step and go a little bit further geographically. Go to conferences, all right? But don't go to conference to just listen to people speak or to go around checking the booths out. Go to have conversations. Make sure you book meetings in advance of going to the conferences, because when the people get to the conferences, they're going to be really busy. So you want to make sure that you do this in advance. Try to get speaking engagements, right? That is super. Panel discussions. One of my, I got a client fairly recently from a panel discussion that I was in. And she came up to me afterwards and started engaging with me. And she is a client of mine now. So these are important things to do, no matter what it is that you're networking about. All right, next slide.
Yeah, Karna, can I just mention here too? Like, if we if you take a step back and you're thinking like, what's driving all this? It's competition, right? The competition is so big in this country. So the businesses have built sort of these machines and processes to help them in all aspects. So for example, we were talking about career growth that is so important. A lot of the corporations that we've seen have, because they want to retain their talent, the best talent, if the leadership doesn't give feedback, formal feedback to 5 people per quarter, they get dinged on their bonus. And now we're seeing, because business is slowing down a little bit, the networking machine is that every person at companies are required to do at least 5 networking events every month, because that's how you do business. So it's all of this is that the competition is so steep that you have to think about every aspect to get the right talent and get in front of the clients. And that's why networking, like Karna said, it's so critical in finding all these different venues that you just went through. It's so important.
And I expect networking not to only be on business hours. I mean, like how many events don't we go to that are in the evenings, right?
Yeah.
You go, you have a drink, you go and chat. There's an after work kind of thing. We just recently went to one, and we meet fantastic people, and you talk to them, you create a bond, you create a relationship. All right. Yeah. Super important. All right. All right, so how do you find and retain talent? This is normally a topic that Mother speaks a lot about, so I'm expecting that you'll pipe in here.
I'm passionate about this. Passionate.
I know. So the US right now, and it has been for a while, and it's still going to continue to be, is a very, very competitive market. It's not only competitive from a business perspective, but it's also competitive when it comes to finding and retaining talent. So we see a lot of layoffs at the moment, but it is still really challenging to find the right people. Mother, didn't you have that story about how it took you 2 years?
Yes. So Karna and I, like again, we said, built big teams and built companies, which meant that we needed the best talent. So like knowing Boston, I've heard of this director. I needed to hire a director of project management and delivery. And I knew I wanted to hire Brian. And I got in touch, I got introduced, and we kept in touch. I brought him in for interviews 3 times through like 2 years to meet the team, to keep him warm, convince him to come over, and I did hire him, but it took 2 years. So it's knowing and going after the people that you want to hire, which again, the networking is important because you're going to hear about them. And like Karna said, we see that talent like is freeing up, right? There are layoffs, but that doesn't mean that all of those are top talents. So you need to also then have a network. This is where Karna can help to say, who are the good folks out there that you want to hire because you want to get the top talent. But yeah. 2 years, I think that's the longest that I'm like I was going to hire.
Normally, when we talk about this, we say that there are very, very fast hiring cycles in the US. So if you find someone that you want, you better get an offer on the table really quickly. You can't hem and haw and go, I don't know, maybe they should interview a few more times, blah, blah, blah. Just go for it. One of the reasons for that is that the US has what we call an at-will employment. Very, very different from other countries. This means that the employee can up and quit with giving 2 weeks notice. All right. Sometimes it's even less than that. All right. But it's not months. It is 2 weeks at maximum. The same goes for firing people. So if you as a leader or a manager, you want to get rid of someone, you can. At-will employment does not require a at-fault reason for letting someone go. You can just say, you know what, this isn't working, or the position has been canceled, and bada bing, bada boom, 2 weeks later, they're gone. But this requires you to have a very good setup to be able to do that so that you can keep your company, your data, your processes safe. Because sometimes in these situations, employees are going to be what we call disgruntled. Disgruntled meaning they're angry that they're being laid off and they will try to sabotage you. So you got to have processes in place for this.
And if you're getting, I should say, when you're getting ready to hire, even before you start interviewing, have the offer letters ready. Like there have been times when I've interviewed, I didn't even get off the train, walk into my car at the parking space, and I got like literally an hour later and be like, hey, you have an offer in your inbox, email inbox. You need to be ready because otherwise, I'm most likely
Someone else is going to
other place. Somebody else is going to snap check. So you have to be prepared, to Karna's point, and think through every step that you need to have ready.
Yeah, and you do it on beforehand, right?
Yeah.
To retain talent, for, as Mada's been talking about, your leadership is really, really, truly important. You need to have a brand, you need to have a style, you need to have something that, you know, your employees will aspire to. You need to be that leader. Both Mada and I, in our various roles in the US, I think for the longest time we used what we call servitude management. So basically, we make sure that we serve the people that work with us or for us, to remove obstacles for them, etc., to make sure that they can do as good of a job as possible. Career progression. This is also can be part of the benefits package that you can include when you're talking about hiring, and I'll go through that in a second. So there are differences in all of these aspects that we're talking about. Some of them are so subtle that you actually think it's kind of the same as it is in other countries or the Nordic countries, but you're going to find when you actually come here that it's not. So it's important to know this. It's important to embrace this before you go over and start taking the steps to start up something, because you also remember, you can't move everyone, or I'm not expecting that you would move everyone from your company where you're at over to the US. You're going to be hiring people over here. And it's expensive to lose people, right? Not only do you lose money and time, but you lose information. You lose a piece of the jigsaw puzzle that you're building. And it's hard to replace that. It takes time and it's costly. All right, let's move on to the next one. Talent management. So your team are going to have expectations on you. They're going to have expectations that you're going to help them grow in their career. They're going to have expectations on having formal reviews and goals. They're going to have expectations that you review those with them to let them know when they're steering off, right? So when they need to get back on track, you need to help them in growth. Don't expect all of that from them. You're there to be their coach, to be their mentor, to lift them up, right? That's how you get the best teams. Leadership, development, and innovation. Not everyone who is a manager is a leader. Mada and I often talk about the differences between management and leadership. Leadership is, you know, you're the head. You're the one that's walking with the flag, leading the company, leading your employees in the direction that you want to go. Managers, which like has almost become a little bit of a dirty word in the US amongst specific groups. They're more like managing tasks. Leaders are more about strategy. And as a leader, it is super important that you show your team this strategy. Be as transparent as you can without divulging corporate secrets, obviously. But, you know, look at your team to be the ones to help you move forward. Give them a career growth, coach them, pay for their training. It will pay off.
Yeah.
Mada,
And that is, yeah, you just mentioned like sharing with them like this, the corporate culture here, and especially the younger generation now coming into the workforce are expecting you also as a leader in a company to be super transparent. They think they have the right to know, and like, how are sales going? What's the vision? What are we investing in? So often at business monthly meetings, you will see leadership sharing all those details. And that could be different too, but the people that you're hiring are going to want to be very close to leadership, to the company. And that's also very different, that we're not used to looking under the hood as much, maybe in the Nordic countries, but they're expecting it. Otherwise, they're going to be out, So it's so important.
All right, let's jump to the next one. Interviewing. This is a fascinating topic that we could talk a lot about. It is enormously different compared to other countries. You're not allowed to ask. Legally, you are not allowed to ask a number of different questions. You can and will be sued if you do. So this is really, really important. There are federal laws in play, but there are also state laws in play. So you need to know the rules in the state federally, as well as the state that you're planning on hiring in. This is not a question of the state that you're incorporated in, because no one really cares. It's the question about the state where your employee will be working, because that's the state that you're going to hire them from. So you can't ask things like, how old are you? Are you married? Do you have children? How much money did you make in your last job? Where are you from? What languages do you speak, etc., etc. That's illegal. You just are not allowed to ask it. And if you do, as I said, there could be serious ramifications. So instead, what do? Well, you work around it. All right. So what are your salary expectations? And before, you ask that question, you make sure that you do research, you find out, use Glassdoor or whatever other, software that's out there to find out what are the expectations of the salary range for someone in this position working out of Denver, blah, 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 right? So that way you can know whether their expectations are in line or not. Don't ask about their family, but hey, can you do this job, even if it requires some evening hours or weekend hours, right? But it's all focused on the job, not their personal life. A question that Mad and I had in one of the recent other webinars that we did was, so you don't include a picture on your resume, on your CV? And Mad and I both like, no, there are no pictures. If you're applying for a job in the US, you do not include a picture. You do not include your marital status, your children, but you do include things like where you worked, what your educational background is, and do you have certifications, etc. But those are the no-nos.
Yeah, and you might already be aware of these things, but the important thing here is that you have a process, because you might include other team members to interview candidates, or you might have more junior resources helping out to interview. And if they don't know not to ask these questions, you can get in trouble. This was like many years ago. I was applying for a job, and they had invited in one of the junior folks to just so he could feel part of the process. And he asked all these questions, and they came in to check in with me in between interviews, because I was interviewing with like 5 people, and I was like, yeah, it was good, but it was very personal, and they freaked out. The CEO was like, stop the interview. They took me out for lunch, making sure I was doing so good, because they were like trying to brush it on the rug so I wouldn't sue them. But then I also didn't get the job because they were afraid of hiring me, because that was so mismanaged. So the important thing here is like setting rules and having the standard questions that you want your extended team to ask team members, because one miss from somebody, again, to Karna's point, it could be detrimental.
All right, jump
I have
to the
a
next
question.
slide.
Yes. Yeah, I also have a question.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Good.
Okay, so you're not allowed to ask about your graduation, but you must be able to ask their previous experience from work.
Yeah.
Can you ask them when they worked there, or is it only the time part that is crucial not to ask for, or I mean,
No,
the fact where they graduated must be relevant.
Yep.
Yeah.
And normally people on their resume, right, they will put their educational background and they will put the years they were there, right? So if they were at Babson College, they will put between, 1997 and 2001. So, you can figure out their age approximately by looking at these things, right? Looking, when did they graduate? When did they start working? When did they do this? When they did do that? But you cannot ask how old they are.
Because then they think you're focusing on it. That's then you're like, oh, they
Age
asked me this because,
discrimination.
yeah,
What is the retirement age?
depends on your savings.
Yeah, between, and it depends on the state, but between 65 and 67.
Okay, so there's no legal limit.
No. Again,
No.
it depends on when you are ready. You can retire when you're 50 if you have the funds. That's why I was joking and saying depends on your savings account. And we have friends that retired when they're 50. It all depends on how well you plan and your career. But you sort of decided, but there's no legal restriction whatsoever that you can say, I have the right. Yeah.
You can work until you're 80 if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's
We know
nothing to
people.
stop you. No?
Nothing
But you
to stop
don't.
you.
But you can get fired at any time as well. So
Yeah.
But if you want to keep an employee, they can stay on, which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's a great thing. Yep. And because my father-in-law is 79, he works every day in the company because he's so valuable. They're like, come in the days you feel like it, take a nap if you want to, but come in and work because he just want to keep on going. It's great. Yes. Sorry, I interrupted.
We had another question, I think.
Yes, actually, I do have 2 questions.
Right.
So I fully understand I cannot ask when you graduated, but am I allowed to ask questions like, I see a gap in your CV. What did you do during this period?
Yes.
I can ask things like that. It's not that I'm
yes,
stepping
anything
into...
that's on their CV is okay, right? So you can ask when they graduated. If normally they will have that information on there, when did you graduate, right? But Mother, you don't agree? You can ask when they graduated?
I think we have always said, like, we don't recommend highlighting because then they can think that you are like trying to figure out their age. So that we have that on the slide. Like, it's more, you don't have to ask the questions that you can see on the resume. Focus in more like, hey, tell me more about your experience at this company where I see a gap. What did you do during that time? Like, highlight more like their experience is what the recommendation is, because they can
absolutely.
They can just see it as like, oh, they're trying to figure out how old I am. Any reason that they can say, because in the US you can sue for anything. So you wanted to stay away from that.
Yes, you can.
Mm-hmm.
I can say something. I can say something quick there. Suing you might say everyone can do it, but if you don't have any proof, you're not going to do anything. So if you're asking something in an interview, and because you've got a good connection with the person, then that's okay if you've got a good connection with the person, as long as you're not getting taped and filmed and all that kind of stuff. If you've been filmed, then you've got the evidence. But you're going to find bad employees that are going to sue you because they didn't get a job anyway, because they're going to try and make some money, right, and get a settlement.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
It's very true. But I mean, there are a tremendous amount of frivolous lawsuits in the US. Frivolous lawsuit meaning that they sue without having any evidence, because they think that just by doing that, the company is going to settle. They're going to get some money because they don't want to go to court.
No. And so, I would say too, when
people, my point. And then people also lie on their CVs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep, they can.
So you need to ask something. If I'm going to hire someone, I want to know, am I getting the right person? I don't want to just hire someone if they've lied on their CV.
No, you don't hire from based on the CV. You dive into it, right? Just like you would everywhere else. Okay, guys, we have 2 minutes until top of the hour. So let's go to the next slide very quickly. There are a number of things that you need to do beforehand. Ulf, if you can move the slide, please.
I think Anne-Marie had one more question.
Oh,
I did, yeah. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
And it's with regards to citizenship. I can see that there is a risk employing someone who is not authorized to work in the US. Would it be possible for me or for the company to end up in a legal situation where we are sort of being in being in a lawsuit, being in a legal process because having someone working for us not
and this is why
person.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, but this is why Karna and I, we are the connectors here, and we would put you in the right connection with their HR consultants out there and HR companies that focus on this, because when you hire somebody, there are rules about they need to supply copies of either their passport or green card and visa. So there are rules from an HR perspective that you collect all that. So unless they've falsify the documentation, you will have that. It's more common in other trades, I would say, that maybe they don't ask for those documentation, but starting a corporate company in the US, they have rules, and you have to scan the documents. They collect all this information. So the risk for that is minimal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank
So
you.
that's actually a great lead in to the very last slide that I think that we have, which is, some additional considerations when you're recruiting and for employee benefits. So there are things that you have to do on from a federal point of view, as well as a state point of view, before you hire someone. And one of that is a form called an I-9. It's a federal form. That is when you, as an employee, when you get hired, you have to fill out this form to legally declare that you are allowed to work in this country. And you have to show proof of citizenship or green card or whatever it is. You have an H-1B visa or, something like that. You as a company, you need to register as a company in the US. You don't only have to create a corporation, and there are different kinds of corporations, but you also have to get specific registration numbers. You need to have certain licenses to do business, depending on what kind of business that you do. And that's also both federal and state, all right? You need to have certain insurances in place, and that's also regulated. And some of them are must-haves and some of them are good-to-haves. On the employee side, benefits, there are a lot of things that people are used to in other countries that are not a given in the US, for instance, healthcare. So there are certain things, again, that's required by law, some of them specifically for state. It's going to be dependent on how many employees do you have in the company, what type of employee level are we talking about, et cetera, et cetera. And then there are certain expectations, because the US is such a competitive market. Before, it could be like, you could bring your dog to work kind of thing. But now it is way more focused on, making sure that there's health and dental and paid time off, family leave, remote work, flex time, and sponsorships for educational things, etc. And that's all part of it. So that was a very, very quick wrap up. I think that we have a summary slide, Madde. So if we can move one more.
Yeah, we do. So real quick, we talked about what to consider, and even when it comes to the area in the US, where you locate your company is important. When it comes to corporate culture, you need to determine if you need to update your business structure, so that it works with the corporate culture in terms of career growth and levels and opportunities for your teams. Reflect on how you will adapt your leadership style and how you want to show up, because that is again going to help you promote your business, but also finding the right talent and keeping the talent. And then networking is a critical part of everything. And recruiting, like we said, it takes time. Everything takes time. So start today. Start, the earlier, the better. And like you can tell, Karna and I have a lot of experience in all this. Let us know if you need any support. It can be anything from, connecting you with companies that set up your business entity or HR, or interviewing talent, finding the talent, operations. We have a vast experience in that, and leadership. We do leadership coaching as well. So it's been great sharing some of our insight. Love to work with you in the future. So just, yeah, get in touch.